Today we're going to be ranking Paul Heyman guys. What is a Paul Heyman guy, you might be asking? Well, Paul Heyman guy is a wrestler that gets paired with the legendary manager Paul Heyman with the purposes of helping him get over with the fans and pushing him to the stratosphere. But not all of them have reached that main event caliber. In fact, you'll see that many of them have absolutely failed and floundered in the WWE. So maybe that begs the question, is Paul Heyman an overrated manager? The answer is no, you idiot. That was clickbait and food for thought because he's the greatest manager of all time. But again, not all of them can be winners. So today we're going to be ranking all of the Paul Heyman guys from Hall of Fame all the way down to trash. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Ring that bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I promise you already found the best wrestling channel that there is because this channel uploads daily. So if you're a wrestling fan, make sure to subscribe. All right, so here are the tiers that we're going to be using. We have Hall of Fame, great, good, meh, and trash. Let's go ahead and get started with arguably the most iconic Paul Heyman guy of all time in Brock Lesnar, who joined the WWE in 2002 and was immediately paired with Paul Heyman. And I dare say that this may have been one of WWE's most ingenious ideas because you have Brock Lesnar, a raw talent who has generational skill qualities and is an absolute physical marvel and something to behold. I make the argument that he could have spent more time in OVW, which was WWE's developmental system at the time, to develop more of a character and get better on the mic. But the WWE knew that they had something physically special and gifted with this man. So instead of waiting more time for him to develop as a character and develop his mic skills, they called him up and immediately paired him with Paul Heyman, who could do all of that mic work for him. And at the time, Paul Heyman, I mean, he still is, but at that time, Paul Heyman was absolutely in his prime in terms of cutting heel promos, and he did an amazing job in terms of helping Brock Lesnar get over. And that pairing just worked magic because Brock Lesnar did all of the talking in the ring and Paul Heyman did all of the talking with the mic. And it just worked. And it immediately propelled Brock Lesnar to the top of the card. That combination of Brock Lesnar's legitimate physical attributes that can make anyone believe, yeah, this guy could defeat the Rock at SummerSlam for the WWE title. Yeah, this guy could win the Royal Rumble in his first year. Yeah, this guy can absolutely kill Hulk Hogan, make Stone Cold retire, and even, I don't know, dude, like even destroy The Undertaker. Like this guy did it all in year one, and all of his physical attributes made us believe that he could do it. But Paul Heyman is the guy that allowed us to make us care about him doing all of those things. And of course, we have this pairing even when Brock Lesnar returns from his WWE hiatus after 8 years, and it's still magic, right? And it's still the same combination, and it is still the same magic that works. Brock Lesnar does all the crap in the ring, Paul Heyman does all the crap on the mic, and it works. It still works to this day, even though we haven't had them in a couple of years. Brock Lesnar has proven that he doesn't necessarily need Paul Heyman anymore, but my goodness, when these two are together, it is absolute magic. I dare argue that this may just be the greatest wrestler-manager combination of all time. I am putting Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman. If there was Hall of Fame Plus, I'd put them in Hall of Fame Plus. Next, let's go ahead and grab Paul Heyman and Cesaro. Did you forget that this happened? I wouldn't be surprised if you did, because I think the WWE did as well. So after Cesaro won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, he was acknowledged and embraced by Hulk Hogan, but also became a Paul Heyman guy, and Paul Heyman was a heel at the time. So we didn't know, is Cesaro a heel? Is he a face? It got very, very confusing. So confusing to the point that I think even the WWE thought it was too confusing, and they just dropped this thing after a couple of weeks. Cesaro started eating losses. Paul Heyman disappeared. It's even debatable to call Cesaro a Paul Heyman guy, but hey, they tried it, even if it was just for a couple of weeks. I think that this could have been a match made in heaven had they done this properly, but I guess they just had no intentions of allowing Cesaro to properly grab the brass ring. I think this was just a fugazi. I don't think that this was a real Paul Heyman guy situation. I think WWE thought that maybe they had some something hot in the pan with Cesaro getting a huge pop, winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Holy man, try saying that fast 10 times. But I think ultimately the WWE had no faith in Cesaro, so this goes into the trash category. At least the pairing. Neither of them are trash. It's just the pairing is trash. Next up, did you also forget that this one existed? Paul Heyman and Heidenreich. He was a Paul Heyman guy for like a couple of weeks. It was mostly a storyline to help Paul Heyman take out The Undertaker. So again, debatable whether or not Heidenreich was a Paul Heyman guy, but hey, he's on this list. But yeah, of course this is a trash combination. Of course this is a trash combination. They did nothing together. They did nothing in terms of accomplishments. They did nothing in terms of getting over with the fans. Heidenreich was a figure in Paul Heyman's grander story with The Undertaker at the time. So again, debatable whether or not this is a Paul Heyman guy, but pairing him with Paul Heyman, even for the short amount of time that we had, did not help Heidenreich get over. So trash. You know what? In the same vein, Paul Heyman and the Dudley Boys, because that was part of the same storyline. Again, Paul Heyman trying to take out The Undertaker. You can make an argument that, hey, the Dudley Boys have this grander story in history with Paul Heyman with their ECW days, but they were never managed by Paul Heyman at that time. This was the only time that they really had like a direct wrestler manager, contact in a relationship. But yeah, again, it's kind of exactly like the Heidenreich situation, where we were just there to tell the overall story of Paul Heyman, not the story of the Dudley Boys getting over because of Paul Heyman. So once again, exactly the same situation as Heidenreich. It goes into the trash category. Paul Heyman and Hardcore Holly. Are you starting to see a trend that not every single Paul Heyman guy is one that you remember and that you idolize? Because yeah, Hardcore Holly was a Paul Heyman guy in ECW, in the WWE version of ECW. For some reason, rather than managing, I don't know, an ECW original or managing, maybe like a fresh new face like a CM Punk, Paul Heyman decided to manage a WWE veteran who did not fit the mold of old school ECW. I don't know why. I really don't know why. It was bad. It was stupid. And Hardcore Holly, to be fair, Hardcore Holly, the man at this point can cure cancer, and he was never going to get over with the fans. People liked Hardcore Holly for his physical and aggressive nature, but he was never going to do anything in terms of getting over with the fans. And I don't think Paul Heyman could have done that either. Trash. Look, there's a lot that are going to go into the trash bin, okay? It's going to be like the two opposites. There's going to be quite a few in the Hall of Fame and then a bunch in trash. All right, let's go put one like that's more in the middle. Let's go ahead and grab Curtis Axel, okay? Because Curtis Axel went from being Michael McSillyputty, I know it's Michael McGillicuddy, I just like calling him McSillyputty, became Curtis Axel and immediately got propelled into the Intercontinental Championship scene by being managed by Paul Heyman. And to be fair, even though Curtis Axel did not go on to have this legendary Hall of Fame worthy career, this pairing was a lot of fun, and I think it worked really well in terms of helping legitimize Curtis Axel as Curtis Axel, because at that time, all of us just saw him as a failed member of the New Nexus. So if that's the case, pairing him with changing his name, changing his gimmick, changing his music, changing his Titantron, and pairing him with Paul Heyman, those are all of the right steps to help revitalize this man's career. And sure, I think it did a pretty good job of doing that. And the second that he was removed from being paired with Paul Heyman, that was the second that we stopped caring about Michael McGillicuddy as Curtis Axel. We just stopped caring. He became immediately this comedy gimmick and a comedy act. This, if anything, proves just how good Paul Heyman is, okay? Because the second that he was separated from Paul Heyman, no one cared. No one cared. Everyone cared purely for the fact that he was paired with Paul Heyman. And again, during their time together, it was a lot of fun. Curtis Axel won some championships. But aside from that, we aren't here sitting, reminiscing of the Hall of Fame career that Curtis Axel ended up having because of Paul Heyman. And then there was Ryback. And Ryback was almost kind of like the same attempt that they tried with Curtis Axel, but it lasted for less. And again, it was a more overarching story that was being told between CM Punk and Paul Heyman. He wasn't really a Paul Heyman guy. He was just there there to be Paul Heyman's physical attribute, basically, in his feud against CM Punk, because of course he has no physical attributes because he's Paul Heyman. He can't do anything physical, so he had to recruit Ryback. But again, that recruitment, not really a Paul Heyman guy in the true sense of the meaning, but he was managed by Paul Heyman. It lasted a few weeks, main evented even a pay-per-view, but it goes into the meh category, mostly again because it was telling an overarching story about Paul Heyman and CM Punk, not really about helping Ryback get over, but it was a better relationship than those that you see in the trash category. Next up, we have Rob Van Dam, and Rob Van Dam was kind of managed by Paul Heyman in the early days of WWE's version of ECW. That version of ECW that I actually did kind of enjoy with the one night stands, but then eventually just became this shell of itself and just became a bastardized version of what we know today as WWE Main Event, a B-C tier show. But for a while we had the pairing of Rob Van Dam and Paul Heyman, and it worked really well for me. It worked in terms of making me care about the legacy of ECW. It helped me care a lot more about Rob Van Dam as a main eventer, because at that time, me and a lot of people really saw him as the spot piece, and Paul Heyman really helped legitimize him as a character to help us, get behind of. And even though it was kind of cut short because of, what Rob Van Dam ended up doing, the DUI and the finding drugs in his car, it was still a very fun pairing. I mean, I just go back to Paul Heyman helping Rob Van Dam win the title by being the one that counts the 1, 2, 3 on John Cena. It's one of the greatest moments in WWE history. Again, not a proper Paul Heyman guy in the sense of like a Brock Lesnar, but it was a really, really fun relationship that I look back on fondly. So it goes into the good category for me. Remember Paul Heyman and Test? Neither do I. Trash. Next, we have Paul Heyman and The Big Show, and this has happened twice. This has happened in 2002 when Paul Heyman turned on Brock Lesnar and then went on to manage The Big Show, and then it happened again in ECW because for some reason, again, Paul Heyman is managing these non-ECW guys, these guys that have a legacy with WWE in an ECW show. It was mind-boggling. It was absolutely mind-boggling. But you know what? I would say that this overall was great, especially during that 2000s feud. Even though, I've been making the case, well, it's not really a Paul Heyman guy because Paul Heyman had a bigger overarching story with somebody else. This pairing was a lot better than say like than say Paul Heyman and Ryback. They had their own individual, chemistry with one another. The stories that they were telling was really good. It happened multiple times in their careers. It helped the Big Show win multiple world titles, the ECW championship and the WWE title. So in terms of accomplishments, Paul Heyman really helped elevate the Big Show. So we'll put him into the great category, if not necessarily for the longevity of their relationship, at the very least for what it did for Big Show's accolades throughout his career. Next, we have Paul Heyman and Kurt Angle. And again, just kind of a stopgap storyline, not a true Paul Heyman guy. This is one of those wrestlers that does not need a Paul Heyman alongside him because Kurt Angle is already fantastic on the mic. He's fantastic in the ring. He was the whole freaking package. But they were paired together for a storyline for storyline purposes. And as we've seen, Paul Heyman does that a lot. So with that being said, because this was an overarching story again, in that story between Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, I'll put this into the meh category because ultimately it's unnecessary. It did nothing for Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle was already the guy at the time, and he would have continued to be the guy without Paul Heyman. So Paul Heyman in this scenario was kind of like there. He's more of the parasite as opposed to the special counsel, right? So I'm going to put that into the meh category. And next we have CM Punk and Paul Heyman. And interestingly enough, just like Kurt Angle, Paul Heyman did not need CM Punk, and CM Punk did not need Paul Heyman. You'd think this wouldn't work, but it did. And it was fantastic. These guys were so good together. It's like when you take something that's already amazing and you combine it with something that's equally amazing, and then you get even more amazing. It was just a pairing that blew our socks off in terms of the storylines that they were telling, whether they were friends together or whether they were foes. The promos that these two would cut together in tandem or against one another were absolutely some of the best in all of the 2010s in WWE. This to me goes into the Hall of Fame, as short-lived as it was, because it was about a half a year ballpark, give or take. It was just magical. It was fantastic. You can also make the argument, of course, that there's a greater story with Paul Heyman wanting CM Punk to be the face of new ECW, WWE not really pulling the trigger on that. Regardless, I digress. These two together were magic. They are so good. And last but not least, we left it to the very end. We have the tribal chief Roman Reigns and his wise men, the special counsel Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman saved Roman Reigns' career. Like dead ass, dead serious. He saved his career. Sure, of course, Roman Reigns turned heel and was without Paul Heyman for the first little bit of the run. But it was Paul Heyman really that helped catapult him from being great to potentially the greatest of all time. This may have surpassed the pairing of Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman, in all seriousness. I hope this pairing honestly just keeps going on forever and ever and ever, because it just works. It is so perfect. Paul Heyman has helped elevate Roman Reigns' game in terms of character work, in terms of storytelling. Hell, just something as simple as facial expressions, something that Paul Heyman is a master at, all of a sudden Roman Reigns is a master at? I don't think so. I don't think he just had that. I think he learned all of that from all of his time with the wise man, Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman catapulted Roman Reigns, somebody who was already in the main event, from the main event conversation to the greatest of all time conversation. That, my friends, is worthy of the Hall of Fame. Get out of here.